Love God and love your neighbor. It's our mission statement. It is the greatest commandment. It was in our opening prayer. Love of neighbor in particular is the driving theme of St. James's letter, which we've been working through for the past few weeks. Today, James addresses one of the great obstacles to doing this. Why is it so hard to love my neighbor? Why is it so hard to embrace poverty and sacrifice in order to be closer to God and better serve others? In a word, our passions. What is a passion? Your passions are your desires. Some translations will call them concupiscence, or it might be better to call them urges. In our fallenness, every human being experiences conflicting desires and emotions. There's usually some kernel of truth or goodness beneath them, but the reality is that these desires are disordered, excessive, confused. These desires beg for satisfaction, and if we do not address them, we feel left without peace. As the Rolling Stones once put it, I can't get no satisfaction. In the worldly way of thinking, what James calls earthly wisdom, the way to solve this problem is to get really good at satisfying the desires with more money, more power, more control. And those who succeed in this will find peace in the ability to satisfy their every desire. So the thinking goes. This scramble for satisfaction really leads to jealousy and selfish ambition. And the more that we blindly satisfy them, the more the desires grow. That desire, that coveting leads to war. Not just armies against armies, but conflict between neighbors, families, companies, and classes in society. Even worse, it creates envy. Envy is not just wanting what someone else has. That's jealousy, covetousness, and that's almost reasonable. They have something good, I want that same something. Envy is hating the fact that they have it at all. It's getting sad and angry that someone else succeeds, even when their success doesn't hurt you. Envy leads people to think and to say, I'd rather no one have it than they have it. Envy will make someone go so far they will even hurt themselves if it means undercutting that person's success or wealth. Jealousy can lead to murder because you want to take what they have. Envy leads to murder out of sheer spite. It is a trap. Chasing these desires, obeying these passions, leads always to more desires. Even winning the wars, killing the opponents, taking everything you want will leave you empty. You kill and envy but cannot attain, James says, because what you want, the perfect satisfaction of every urge, is impossible. But the trap is not always obviously so bad. Even the apostles fall prey to them. Jesus just told them he would be crucified, but they're arguing about who's the most important leader in their group. So Jesus sets them straight with the same answer as James in different words. The way to authentic satisfaction is not to be above others, to be wealthy and powerful and successful. It is rather to set oneself as a servant to all. In ancient culture, children had no rights and weren't really considered full persons, unlike today, where we tend to make the whole world revolve around them. And the point of Jesus embracing this child is that the child was unimportant and not worth paying attention to in that time. By telling them to receive this child in his name, he's emphasizing the power of caring for the least among us. The power. I mean the power of genuine peace and satisfaction that cannot come from constantly chasing our passions. This is the power of the wisdom from above. This wisdom is first of all pure, James says. By purity, we don't just mean saying no to carnal desires. Purity is best defined as having a single, unifying, unselfish purpose. The pure of heart are those who put God above all else and direct everything else in their lives to that goal. The reality is that every desire, every longing of the human heart is ultimately satisfied by God and God alone. Concupiscence, passions, and urges are distortions of that authentic desire. But if we can cut through that, if we can look past the intense but temporary feelings at what they were meant to be, we can find a satisfaction that is not possible by chasing them. Following your passions is kind of like trying to drive forward while only looking at your rearview mirror. You might get an accurate reflection, but backwards, but it still won't help you go forward. Purity means looking at God above all and judging every action and decision in relation to Him and His will for us. This in turn makes us peaceable, gentle, compliant, listening to reason, full of mercy and good fruits. By looking at God instead of unreliable passions, we can avoid inconstancy and insincerity, the trap of defining ourselves by changing emotions and feelings. So how do we define this purity? How do we obtain this purity? The first step is doing the mental work of recognizing what kind of wisdom we're living for. Earthly wisdom or wisdom from above? As I mentioned last week, an important way to test this is to consider how we look at charity. Is charity what I do after I've satisfied myself, what I do with my extra time and money? That is worldly. Or is charity the primary motivation for every action, even my rest and recreation? That is wisdom from above. Another way to tell is how we respond to unanswered prayer. James tells us, you ask but do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. The point is that we should never ask for nice things like rest and recreation. The point is that when a prayer is unanswered, do we see it as it is? An invitation to a deeper perspective, a challenge to push our motivation a little more towards love of God and neighbor and a little less towards ourselves. If we're honest, we all have more or less of that selfishness. How do we shift it towards charity? Prayer and practice. Ask daily for the grace to live your life for charity instead of yourself. And every night, take time to reflect on what you've done that day, whether it was for others or yourself. Young parents with young children, a lot of that is going to be serving your children. But all of us need to ask this question: am I living for others today or myself? And to resolve to live the next day for others too. And when you're about to do something that isn't directly serving God or another person, lots of things fall into that category, take a moment to pray. Invite God into that activity. Ask Him to help you benefit from this rest or recreation so that you can better serve Him and others. And then think of someone and pray for them briefly. Pray especially for those who lack whatever it is you're about to enjoy. About to have a nice cold beer, pray for those who can't have one. The goal is to receive others, whether they're important or not, into your heart in everything you do. For by receiving them, you receive Jesus Christ, who alone can satisfy the human heart.